so today we are going to deal with the world famous novel, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This is an American novel, and this is a very famous novel. This is an important novel, especially because this is the novel, unlike other writers, unlike most of the other writers who have won Nobel Prize for literature. This man won the Nobel Prize exclusively for this particular novel, which is very much unlike other writers. So in that sense, this particular novel assumes great importance, and that's what we are going to deal with today. Probably we'll start with the writer himself, Ernest Hemingway. He was born in Oak Park, Illinois. He was the son of a doctor and a music teacher. And at the age of 18, he volunteered as an ambulance driver in Italy during World War I, where he was badly injured. Now, this man, we will see in his life, was associated with war throughout, and which is evident from his novels. We will deal with that later maybe. He started his writing career as a reporter, and he continued that career for a long time. He served as a correspondent. He started maybe with the Kansas City Star. He went on to serve as a correspondent in Paris for the Toronto Daily Star. He achieved fame as a chronicler of the disaffection felt by many American youth after the First World War. Now, the world wars. You know that after the World War, I think you have had this already. After the World War, we have a particular genre of writing called war poetry, right, which comes after the World War. Now, wars, especially when it involves the majority of the people in the world, leaves wounds which are really hard to cure, right? And these wounds fester, and they cause in some way or the other, they bring about dissatisfaction, disinterest, hatred, and hopelessness among people. Now, writing good literature tries to bring out this aspect of the war. What does the war do to people? Where does a war leave the people? Right? So he achieved fame as a chronicler of this this fear, disaffection, right? We say that the binding force among people is love, and that is exactly what is being lost when you are when you are affected by war, right? Now, in 1936, he wrote for Esquire about a Cuban fisherman. He also worked in Cuba, and which is the location for our novel. And he has also covered the Spanish Civil War. He was not merely, he was a man of all, jack of all trades. Like, he has undergone a lot of experiences as an individual, as a person. So, he was an adventurer. In Paris in 1920s, he fell in with a group of expatriate writers. There were, he could associate with them. He could, sympathize with them. Most of them thought about the after effects of war. And, he was a big game hunter in Africa. He was one of his favorite, hobbies was to hunt. He was an avid fisherman in Cuba, as you would see him in the novel. He was a boxer, a bullfighter, and a huge fan of baseball. He won a Bronze Star in World War II as a war correspondent in combat. We already saw how he was associated with war. And he, as part of his war career, he flew small planes to dangerous places, and he had been met with 2 distinct crashes from which he miraculously escaped. And in terms of marriage also, he was very adventurous. He had 4 marriages, 3 of them unsuccessful. As he is usually, I don't know whether you watch, I think I've told you about this particular movie, that movie Midnight in Paris. Midnight in Paris. There's a beautiful movie called Midnight in Paris. You should all watch it, where this particular writer Hemingway appears. Possible, watch the movie. You will see him as a macho man, a very muscular man who stands for masculinity. Right. And his novels, all of them were very famous, popular at that point in time, and were critically acclaimed too. His novels, The Sun Also Rises, is probably his first important work. Then comes A Farewell to Arms, which won him critical acclaim. He became a dominant literary voice of his time with that particular novel. And he also published For Whom the Bell Tolls, which has been translated. I think almost all his novels have been translated into many languages across the globe. He won the Pulitzer Prize and Nobel Prize for The Old Man and the Sea, which became the defining novel in his career in 1953. And he was awarded the Medal of Honor by Batista, the former dictator of Cuba. Of course, the novel deals with Cuba. So, in his later years, he nicknamed himself as Papa, right? Because he had a flowing, gristly beard, white beard, and a very jolly-looking face. He had a very devastating family background. His father committed suicide, and probably that led to his paranoia, mental. He was very paranoid and depressed throughout his life. At the age of 61, he killed himself with a shotgun, and that is how his life comes to an end. Ernest Hemingway is known for his writing style. It is he who very famously said that he rewrote more than 100 times this particular novel. He was very paranoid. There is something called OCD, and which is considered to be a mental disease for some people. But then in writing, this particular OCD is necessary. What is OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorder. You realize that what you have written, what you have done in terms of writing is not good enough. You need to rewrite it. The word is not proper. The phrase is not enough. The sentence is too long. So you need to work on it, right? So he worked, reworked several times, and the final output, The Old Man and the Sea, became a classic. So his writing style, he's very terse as in, he's very, miserly about writing. He believes that too many words are not necessary to express a particular idea, right? And he uses a condensed sentence structure and symbol language. Very simple. I don't think, if you take the novel, if you read the novel, you would understand. If you have already read the novel, you would have understood that, the language is not very difficult at all. Not at all. Language is pretty simple, very straightforward. But at the same time, straightforward doesn't mean that the words are not, it radiates lights, as in a prism where a ray of light goes through. when through a prism a ray of light goes through and it radiates, it disperses colors the same way. You know, a word is enough to evoke emotions mirrored in an individual's mind. So he uses condensed sentence structure and very simple language. He was a revolutionary for his time and was imitated by generations of young writers. I think, you know, he is one of the heroes of budding writers in terms of the style. Do not write too much, you know, but at the same time when you write, what matters is what you write and not how much you write. And this is applicable for your exam papers as well. Right, so, you know, when it comes to the novel, you have the protagonist of the novel, Santiago. He is a skilled fisherman who has a deep respect for the sea and all of nature. He's a very careful man, a very scrupulous man when it comes to dealing with nature. He's an old man, elderly man, and then as the title suggests, an old man. He's an old man and very poor too. He's very confident despite periodic setbacks or failures. He has been without fish, he has been without success for a long time, for almost 80 plus days. But then he is determined, very determined. He feels it is a sin to lose hope. You know, if you look at Christian, and there is so much of Christian ideology in the novel as we would see later, it is a sin to be hopeless, to be desperate. Despair is a sin, is a cardinal sin. To lose hope is to mean that you have no faith in God. To lose hope in God is to mean that you have no faith in the future, after death. You would not. I mean, what is despair? Despair is the feeling that you would not inherit heaven. Right? The idea that you would not inherit heaven, that is despair, and that's a sin, that's a cardinal sin. Right? So he was an optimist, a thorough optimist to that. And he was lonely. Santiago was a lonely man. Not many friends were with him. He had only a little boy, as his confidant and a friend. And he is Christ-like, and to which we will come a bit later. And that has so much of symbolic value. And to talk about Manolin the boy, there is a boy with the old man, right? Manolin is his name. He's a minor character. He truly loves and respects the old man. He is a very dear friend of him, a nurturer of Santiago, because, you know, he brings him food and water and drinks and other things which the poor man does not have any recourse to. I mean, he's an old man, he's a poor man, he does not have too much to eat, no money, and especially on the days when he does not have any profit from the job that he's doing, you know, he needs to get help from this particular boy. So he's a nurturer of Santiago. And he is a good student as well. He will learn all Santiago has to teach him about fishing, the sea, and his respect for nature. So he's a good disciple of Santiago. And he is determined to carry on Santiago's legacy. Although his parents do not accept that, do not agree with him, you know, when he tells them that he wants to go with him. Parents are because, you know, I mean, they know that Santiago is an unlucky man. The worst form of salao, that's a word used, salao, an unlucky streak of having no fish, getting no fish from the sea. So he is determined that he will carry on Santiago's legacy. Through him, Santiago will never die, and that's his idea. Now the novel is written from a third person limited, omniscient. What do you mean by third person narrative? There are different kinds of narratives. You have the first person narrative when what is first person narrative? Yeah, there is the I always, it's through the protagonist that you see everything. What you see, the world outside, is through the eyes of the protagonist. You have the second person narrative, which is very rare, very, very difficult to get. You have the third, the you as the subject, right? You do this, you do that. Have you ever come across a writing like that? Yeah, Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, a beautiful novel. I think we have discussed this before. Has anyone tried reading it? Has anyone read it? You have read it. Very good. So, that's a second person narrative. You have you as the subject, and the third person, which is the most common narrative technique, where he, she, it, you see there is the writer, omniscient writer, who sees everything, who understands everything and sees everything in front of him. So he is the omniscient. He knows everything. So the third person, limited omniscient. There are certain things that a writer does not know. He's limited in that sense. So, because when he focuses on San Diego, it is exclusively San Diego. He does not know what's happening back there on the shore. Right? It's exclusively San Diego. The focus is mainly on San Diego, helping us to understand his character and how his emotions are, what his emotions are. The writer uses an introspective monologue when San Diego is alone on the sea. So that's how it works. That's how it progresses. The novel progresses. And this particular style helps the reader to sympathize with San Diego and his plight. There are times when the stream of consciousness, you know what stream of consciousness is? Virginia Woolf is the? Yeah, Virginia Woolf, and her style is, there are many others who have employed this particular style, where this is a loose structure of mental images, one after the other, parading through the mind of the person. And that's what stream of consciousness, that's a particular technique which was prevalent in the beginning of the 20th century. Right. Hemingway has San Diego flashback. There are times when San Diego has flashback where this particular technique is used. Memories of his life, randomly those come to his mind. There are times when he is semi-delirious. Now, when a man is on sea for days consecutively, naturally the food is scarce, the water is scarce, and the heat is intense, the view, a man is an isolated being in the end. Have you ever been to the sea? Yeah, you have been. People have been. But you have never been alone in the sea. We always have people around us, and when we are alone, isolated in the sea, that might, we talked about different kinds of psychic problems in the previous class. Most of the fears that we have manifest when we are alone. We see things in the sea. You must have heard of people, navigators, sea voyagers, right? Coming back and tell you fantastic stories. I don't know, maybe it might not happen now, but there are times when people in the past have gone to the sea alone and come back and tell stories of this kind. So, these kinds of narrations of this man, his memories, his throwbacks, all these things are in the stream of consciousness style. The setting of the novel is, the time period is contemporary, as in it happens in the 1940s. The place is a small fishing village near Havana, Cuba. The book spans a period of 5 days, not more than 5 days. If you look at the book itself, it's just fewer than 100 pages. So it's about 5 days that happens in, that he spends in the sea. And he is in a boat on the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. That's where the events take place. So, there are images appearing in the novel, mostly flashbacks. There is so much in common between Santiago and Hemingway, right? His wrestling match, that he was a boxer, right? His wrestling match, Santiago's wrestling match with El Negro and Cienfuegos from when he was younger and is in his prime. The pictures of his wife suggesting his past life, all these are flashbacks that happen in the novel. There are the memoirs of the two marlins that he caught. He has a very affectionate relationship with marlins. Marlin is a huge fish. It can grow up to the length of a man or beyond, right? 6 feet or 7 feet or even bigger. So, he has the memoirs of two marlins that he and Manolin encountered on previous fishing trip. He remembers when he fished with Manolin and would talk to him and to prevent becoming lonely. He is fighting loneliness. He's old man, in his old last days, he's fighting loneliness, and that's why he has this particular boy along with him, Manolin. Right. Then there are other characters. The marlin is an important character. Marlin, the fish, he calls the marlin his brother. Now that is reminiscent of Christ. Yeah. At the end of his life, at the time when he is dying, between the two thieves, he calls one of them he has been always calling people around him his brothers. So now, Santiago calls the marlin, the fish, his brother. He considers this particular fish his equal and a worthy opponent, and that's how this discourse progresses. Now, he is fighting his equally powerful marlin, right? Although he had a harpoon, you know what a harpoon is? What is a harpoon? A kind of a spear that fishermen use to kill. Harpoons were used in the past to kill whales. The sperm whales. So although he had a harpoon through his heart, he was mighty enough to jump one last time to show his power and greatness. So the marlin, right? So Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio is the idol. He was a player. He was what is that? The American football player. What is it called? Right. He is a sportsman. Right. He is his idol. Right. Santiago's thought turned to him whenever he needs to reassure himself of his own strength. Right. He needs inspiration, and for that, he has these idols. Despite a painful, Joe DiMaggio had a surgery. He had to undergo surgery. He had a bone spur, which is a disease that affects the bones of an individual, which is usually detrimental to any player. Now, this man, you may have, I don't know, when you were very young, Sachin Tendulkar was a very the national idol. He had to undergo a shoulder injury, right? Those days when he underwent that shoulder injury, the kind of mixed reactions that could be, because the people thought that Indian cricket itself came to an end. People thought the future of Indian cricket itself came to an end. The people thought. So there was so much of expectation on the shoulders of Sachin Tendulkar. So the same way, Joe DiMaggio had a particular physical condition, and he came back strongly after that and went on to play. So he went on to secure a triumphant career in baseball, right, for the New York Yankees. So he never actually appears in the novel. He doesn't come, but he appears in the thoughts of Santiago, right? So the motives. What do you mean by a motive? Motive is a recurring theme, a theme that recurs. It might be an image, it might be an idea that recurs, that comes again and again in a particular narrative, and that's a motive. Now, there are several motifs that come in this particular novel. The main one of the most important one is suffering. And you will see suffering Santiago mentally, physically, right? So he has, his hands wounded, his body wounded, exhausted man. You have mentally exhausted Santiago when, although he has this never dying ambition, right? He is physically bruised. He's mentally bruised. He is mentally exhausted. But then there is this undying inspiration in him, undying hope in him. Right. So baseball and Joe DiMaggio is another motive. He comes often, again and again, in the dialogues, in the mental dealings of Santiago. Dreams of the lions. If you have read the novel, you see he dreams lions several times. In the beginning of the novel, in the middle of the novel, as he progresses, you will see at the end of the novel, he is dreaming lions playing on the beach. And luck is an important one. He has been unlucky several times. All his life he has been unlucky, and luck plays an important role as a motive. And there is life from death. The suffering of the Marlin also is an important one. Marlin is dead. He comes back to life. Most of the time when somebody dies that he comes back to life. I don't know whether you understand what I'm trying to tell you. For example, take the example of Christ. Christ comes back to life in full strength when he is dead. It's after the death of Christ that Christianity progresses. The spirit of it is after the death of Gandhi that Gandhi comes to life. So life does not end with death. Death is just a beginner. It's just a beginning. It's with death that life begins, maybe. And crucifixion imagery, especially when he is carrying the mast on his back to the shore. There is, like Christ is carrying the crucifix. You will see the image several times. Symbolism, Santiago has been equated with Christ, Jesus Christ. Santiago is he is like every man, an ordinary man, right? And is equated with Jesus Christ, who from the glory of heaven, from the comfort of the triune God, comes down to the earth to die, to become one among the men and to die for them, right? Santiago is one like that. And as a result of this, the novella is a Christian allegory. You will see that, right? You have, the war image, as in suffering. The man of war bird. What is a war bird? And a bird of there is an interesting novel called Fly Away Peter by David Malouf. Have you heard of this particular name, David Malouf? I think you have a particular novel, a poem by David Malouf called The Bicycle. Have you read this poem, Bicycle? I think it's there in your syllabus. I don't know whether you have, but I think it is part of the syllabus. David Malouf is an Australian writer, a novelist and poet. He talks about war in this particular novel called Fly Away Peter. The war of the bird, the war bird is the metal bird that brings people into war and out of war. What is that? Helicopters and warplanes, right? So, this man, he is a war bird, as in, he has been through war. He does not find any problem in admitting failure. He is ready to admit failure. And that is exactly why, even after knowing that the fish that he is carrying home is a carcass, and most of which the flesh has been eaten away by sharks, he takes it back home. Because he knows that it is not a failure. Every failure, as some wise man said, is a stepping stone to success. right? So, the novel teaches us that there cannot be an actual failure in life. So you have the turtles, it is said that their hearts continue to beat even after death. You have the sea turtles, they often come to the water, the surface. Now, how Santiago's heart or spirit is undefeated. He's like a sea turtle, a turtle that never dies. That, sea turtles are known for their longevity. They live long. You have the weary warbler, the bird, the threats of him impending. The warbler is there to let you know that there is some doom is impending, right? The hawks are the warbler, right? For Santiago, that he has done the work of his life. He is taking back a dead body, what you call a carcass of a fish, right? And there is doom awaiting him, but then he is not afraid. Right? You have the Marco shark, the shark. The sharks attack. Sharks attack the dead fish, right? They are, he considers them noble enemy, beautiful and dangerous. You have the shovel-nosed sharks, those who take advantage of others' works. Those sharks that eat away the flesh of the fish, right? So, these are some of the symbolisms of nature in the novel. Now, you have the symbolism of the marlin. Marlin is also very important. This novel is a novel of symbolisms mainly. So, you have marlin that comes as an important symbol. Marlin is noble and worthy adversary. He is the ideal opponent. Marlin is no ordinary marlin. It is larger than life. It's the biggest that he has ever seen in the long years that he spent in life. This is the biggest marlin that he has ever seen. And it does the unexpected, that it never dies. It refuses to die. It takes his boat along with it. No marlin does that. Marlins generally succumb to death immediately after you catch it. But then this marlin refuses to die. It takes you along. It takes the boat along. It perseveres, right? It fights back, does not give up. And therefore, the marlin is worthy of Santiago's effort and strength. It's not what you bring back home what matters, but what you have encountered in the war that matters. Do you follow what I'm saying? It is not what you bring back home that matters, but rather what you have encountered in life. So the means may not be justified by the end, right? Rather, the end is justified by the means, right? So you have the lions recurring theme in the beach. So in the first two dreams, they represent youth, the young lions playing. So even though he is an old man, dying, nearing death, you have the youth in him, right? So they are innocent and very playful. So there is in him, he is after the baseball. He watches, he follows, sports like a child, right? Along with Manolin. And the last dream, they represent the circular nature of life. Manolin will fish with Santiago from now on, right? Learning all of his skills, expertise, and love and respect of nature. Through Manolin, Santiago's legacy will live on. So now it will be Manolin who will dream of lions from now on. So there is the circle of life, right? Also because lions are fierce predators. Lions are predators. Like if you observe a cat, you would see that how it plays with its prey, right? So playing his dream suggests that a harmony between opposing forces. So there is the lion in him, but at the same time a peaceful life and death, love and hate. All these things are part of life. You cannot foreground one and say that others are bad. It's all part of life. There is no black and white parting of good and bad in life. Rather, life is generally gray, with all black and white mingling together. And the most important maybe symbolism of the novel is the crucifixion imagery. Right. So he goes on without fish for 240 days, which amounts to 80 days. So 40 days stands for the time that Christ spent in wilderness, being tempted by the adversary, the Satan, right, the devil, right. So he is being tempted. He is undergoing the salavo, the unlucky days, right. And you have the cuts on which are known as the, what is it called, stigmata. Stigmata is a technical term for the wounds in the hands of in the palms of Christ. Sorry, what's happening? Right. So they are. You have, because he has been holding the tight rope for days, he has the stigmata on his palms and his chest and on his body. So, and when he's at the end of the day, when he's carrying the mast home, the mast home after returning with the carcass of the marlin, he stumbles and falls 5 times. In contrast to the 3 times Christ fell on his way to Calvary, to his death. Right. When Manolin finds Santiago the next morning, he is lying face down on his bed with his arms spread out, palms up, much like Christ. Right. So Santiago tells Manolin that he will need to rest, but he will be able to fish within 3 days. That's again symbolic of the resurrection of Christ after 3 days. Right. So in these ways, you have Santiago representing Christ. The complex Christian imagery in the novel. So the themes to quickly go through the novel, to quickly glance through the themes, we would come across these themes. Unity versus nature. You have a man's physical, mental unity going against the power of nature. You have heroism fighting, heroism and fighting the good fight. So as I've told you, what matters is the means and not the end. Defeat, another theme. Man is not made for defeat. Nothing can defeat you, even death. Right? A man can be destroyed, but not defeated. The very famous line. It's one of the other theme is also. Success is also another theme. Material, inner, spiritual success. It's also about self-respect and pride. It's about worthiness, manhood. So these are some of the themes of the novel. I guess that's about it. I guess we will have a detailed discussion on the idea of crucifixion, Christ, Christian imagery in the novel, which probably we'll do in the next class. So that's about it. Thank you.